Hi, my name is Adelpha, and this is the story of how my rich family pretended to toast my engagement, but never once said my fiancé's name out loud. They didn't forget. They erased him, just like they erased me. They printed invitations without him, cropped me out of family portraits, and smiled through speeches that humiliated the man I love. But when he took the mic that night, he didn't ask for applause. He gave them the truth they'd spent generations hiding. What kind of family builds a legacy so fragile it crumbles the second someone speaks plainly? And when that someone is black, do they call it courage or call it a mistake? I should have known something was off when no one clapped. You'd expect at least a murmur of surprise when your youngest daughter announces her engagement, some awkward toast, maybe even a joke, but instead, I got silence. The only sound in that grand dining room was the faint clink of Isolde's fork against her plate. She glanced up, her pearl necklace unmoving, lips curved in a smile that felt colder than the marble floors beneath us. "Well," she said, her tone almost too measured, "isn't that unexpected?" Across the table, Seraphine chuckled. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was the kind people give when they hear something they don't take seriously. She leaned into Everett's shoulder, whispering something that made his eyes narrow, amused. He didn't look at me. None of them did. "You're sure?" Seraphine asked. "I mean, this isn't a phase or something?" My fingers tightened around my water glass. "Yes, I'm sure." No one asked when we met, how he proposed, if he made me happy. Just that. "Are you sure?" As if love was a math problem I'd miscalculated. Vernon, my father, chewed slowly, as if the moment didn't involve him at all. He didn't speak, didn't even look up, just kept eating his steak like someone was narrating a news story 2 states away. Marcellus's name wasn't mentioned, not once. Like he wasn't real. Like I hadn't spent the past 2 years building a life with him. I pushed my chair back after dessert, made some excuse about work emails, and left before they could launch the next round of thin-lipped smiles and not-so-subtle questions. Outside, the wind off Lake Michigan bit through my coat, but I didn't pull it tighter. The cold grounded me. It had taken me everything to bring up our engagement at dinner. I had imagined, naively I admit, that once the words were out, things would shift, that maybe the formality of it would demand some respect. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, the real blow landed. A courier dropped off the formal invitation to my father's birthday gala. It was glossy, embossed with gold trim, listing names of notable guests. Vernon Caldwell turned 65, a legacy celebration. I flipped the envelope over, expecting Adelpha Caldwell plus guest. It just said, Adelpha Caldwell. I called my mother immediately. She answered on the second ring, always alert when she didn't know who was watching. "Hi, Mom. Quick question about the gala invite." "Oh yes," she cut in. "Isn't it lovely? I had the design team do something extra this year." "Yeah, it's elegant. I just noticed it didn't include a +1. Was that a mistake?" Silence. Then that tone, honey-laced with arsenic. "Well, this year's event is more family-focused. Legacy, you know. I didn't think you'd be bringing a date." I nearly dropped the phone. "A date? Don't be so sensitive, Adelpha. These things are delicate. You know how the committee can be about appearances." "The committee? You mean our family?" More silence. Then a soft exhale. "Don't turn this into something it's not." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. And that night, I sat at my dining table, invitation in front of me, unopened champagne bottle to the side. Marcellus was working late. I hadn't told him yet. Part of me was ashamed, not of him, but of how little power I seemed to have when it came to claiming him in front of my own blood. I stared at the thick envelope. My name looked so clean, so deliberate, alone. I remembered being 12 years old, sitting in the back seat of our Cadillac, while my sisters argued over who got front. I had stayed quiet, hoping someone would notice I wasn't being heard. They didn't. I had always been the quiet one, the easy daughter, the one who didn't ask for much. But something about this wasn't childhood teasing. This was erasure. They didn't just exclude Marcellus. They were pretending my engagement wasn't real, that he wasn't real. which meant, in their world, neither was I. At midnight, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. I found the Gala event page, scrolled through the guest list. Everyone had a +1. Everyone. Even Seraphine's college friend who'd just gotten divorced. I clicked decline. Then I shut the laptop and looked at the invitation one last time. They don't see him, I whispered. And then, just as softly, maybe more painful. And maybe they don't see me either. The words kept circling in my mind like a looped voicemail. Quiet, unshakable. They don't see him. They don't see me. The following week passed like walking underwater. I went to work, attended meetings, smiled when expected, but beneath it all, I was calculating something deeper than schedules or numbers. I was measuring the weight of my own invisibility. On Thursday morning, I got an email from Seraphine. Subject line, Family Friends Networking Night. The text was brief and polished, as always. Hey Adelpha, hosting a small cocktail evening Saturday at the Avalon Rooftop Club. Just some familiar faces, low-key. Would love for you and your fiancé to drop in. It's all love. S. All love. Her signatures always tasted like perfume sprayed over mildew. Marcellus read the email over my shoulder and simply nodded. Let's go, he said, brushing my hair behind my ear. Maybe this time will be different. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of ash and a breeze that carried that early spring bite. Marcellus looked sharp in a charcoal suit, simple but tailored. I wore a navy wrap dress, nothing flashy, just enough to remind the room I was present on purpose. The Avalon was glossy as ever, gold lighting, live jazz humming in the background, and trays of shrimp cocktails floating through manicured hands. Seraphine met us at the elevator in a silver sheath dress, all teeth and approval. You two look great, she chirped, kissing the air near my cheek. Come, there are people I want you to meet. I already knew where this was going, but I followed anyway. Within 5 minutes, she'd guided us into a tight circle near the terrace, and there he was, Ryan, white, mid-30s, clean-cut, Stanford MBA. I'd met him once at a charity golf tournament years ago. Seraphine linked her arm through his like they were siblings in a toothpaste commercial. Adelpha, remember Ryan? He just got back from Singapore, managing director now. Ryan extended a hand. Good to see you again, he said, eyes flicking briefly to Marcellus. Marcellus took the handshake, firm but polite. Likewise. There was a pause, just long enough for the temperature to drop by 10 degrees. Then Isolde materialized, champagne in hand. Just wanted to make sure you still had options, she said softly, as if that made it a compliment. It didn't. Marcellus's jaw tensed. He didn't flinch, but I knew that stillness, how he pulled emotion behind the curtain to keep from snapping. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. My voice came out sharper than I intended. We're not here for auditions. Oh, darling, Isolde replied smoothly. Everything is an audition. Especially when legacy is involved. Ryan cleared his throat and murmured something about needing to say hello to someone across the room. Seraphine shrugged as if she had no idea what went wrong. We didn't stay long after that. On the ride home, Marcellus stayed mostly silent. I wanted to apologize for dragging him into that mess, for letting them disrespect him. But he wasn't the one who needed the apology. I was the one being asked to choose between them and him, over and over. By Monday, the air had shifted. Isolde sent a follow-up text. Dinner at the house Wednesday. Family only. Bring Marcellus. It felt like a setup, but I went anyway. Their dining room still smelled like old pine and lemon polish. The table was set like a magazine shoot, perfectly symmetrical, glassware lined up like soldiers. Marcellus sat to my right. Everett across from him, Seraphine diagonally. Isolde at the head. It started out civil. They asked about our apartment, my job, the weather. Then Everett leaned forward. So, Marcellus, he said casually, what's your 5-year plan? I blinked. Marcellus, always steady, replied, I plan to open a specialized neuro rehab clinic on the south side. I've been working with a few partners on a pilot. Everett nodded, his smile too wide. That's noble, not exactly. High yield, but important. Isolde added, your field must be quite fulfilling, though I imagine it doesn't always provide the kind of security a growing family requires. Seraphine sipped her wine and stared into the chandelier. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, he's a doctor. You realize that, right? Everett chuckled. Oh, of course, it's just, well, there's a difference between practicing medicine and owning the building where it's done. Marcellus smiled politely, but I could feel the storm just beneath his skin. He said nothing, and that silence was louder than anything I could have yelled. Dinner ended soon after. No dessert, no warmth, just closing remarks about how lovely it had been. In the car, neither of us spoke until we reached my building. Marcellus parked, turned off the engine, and looked straight ahead. That wasn't a dinner, he said finally. That was an audit. And for the first time in months, I had no words. 3 days later, I found myself standing in the same foyer where I'd spent half my childhood rehearsing good posture. My heels echoed across the polished floors, and the chandelier overhead cast the same golden light it always had, warm on the surface, cold just beneath. I hadn't planned to stop by that day. But Isolde had called that morning with her usual clipped efficiency, asking if I could come over to review Gala placement logistics. Translation, stand where she told me to and pretend to be honored to exist on the edges of her world. As I waited for her to descend from whatever wing she had quarantined herself in, I wandered toward the main hallway. It had been updated since my last visit. The wallpaper had changed, now ivory with a faint silvery thread running through it, tasteful and sterile. But what stopped me wasn't the wallpaper. It was the massive new portrait hanging at eye level just beyond the staircase. At first glance, it was stunning. A professionally lit, perfectly arranged photo from Seraphine's engagement party. Everyone stood in semi-formal poses, Seraphine in the center, naturally, Everett beside her, Isolde on the left, Vernon on the right, and a gap, a noticeable, perfectly symmetrical, unoccupied space. I blinked, looked again. That's where I'd been standing that night. I remembered the photographer calling me to squeeze in next to Vernon. I remembered fixing my lipstick 5 minutes before, telling Marcellus I looked too shiny. I remembered him telling me, "You're glowing." But in the portrait, I wasn't there. I stepped closer, eyes searching for a trace, maybe a shoulder, a strand of hair, a mistake. Nothing. Isolde appeared behind me, her presence always announced by the softest click of her heels. "Lovely, isn't it?" she said, eyes fixed on the frame. The photographer captured something timeless. I didn't respond. My stomach clenched like it was bracing for impact. "I was in this photo," I finally said. She sipped her tea. Of course she had tea, even in her own hallway, and said, "The original, yes, but the angle wasn't ideal. The composition felt off." The photographer made a judgment call. I turned to face her. So the call was to erase me? Her tone didn't shift, not even a flicker. "You're being overly dramatic. You think I'm overreacting because I noticed I was cut out of my own family's portrait?" She tilted her head, voice softening just enough to sting. "It's not about cutting you out, Adelpha. It's about curating presence. You, of all people, should understand the importance of optics. Legacy is visual." That word again, legacy. She used it like it had moral authority, like it gave her permission to remove anyone who didn't match the color scheme. I left the foyer before she could say anything else, but I didn't leave the house. Instead, I walked through the kitchen, out to the back sunroom, where she usually held her tea meetings with her circle. The space was silent, airy, staged. I sat at the edge of the chaise and waited. Eventually, she followed. We sat in silence for a long time. She poured more tea, not offering me any. "I'm not saying he's a bad man," she began, as if we'd been in conversation all along. "But the world isn't kind to his kind, and neither is this family." There it was. No metaphor, no innuendo, Just facts, wrapped in linen. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. So let me understand, I said quietly. You'll post the speech he gave at that benefit last month. You'll accept the press it brings, but you won't let him exist in a picture with your name on it? She folded her napkin once, then again. He doesn't fit the legacy we've built. That's not prejudice. It's preservation. I stood. Not because I was done, but because I couldn't sit there a second longer without shattering something. She called after me. You're still invited to the gala, Adelpha. I didn't answer. I was already halfway out the door. Back at my apartment that night, I opened Instagram. Seraphine had posted the portrait. It had over 200 likes already. Comments poured in. The perfect family. Y'all are goals. Legacy looks good on you. I stared at the space where I should have been, cropped clean, as if I'd never stood there at all. And then I zoomed in. I stared at the crease between Vernon's hand and Isolde's side, where there had once been a sliver of my arm. It was gone now, airbrushed to match the wall behind them. They didn't just crop me out of a photo, they were erasing me on purpose. I stared at that photo for nearly an hour. Every 5 minutes, I'd zoom in closer, as if I'd somehow overlooked myself. As if maybe I was tucked into the background, reflected in a window pane, or accidentally caught in a mirrored vase. But no, I wasn't there. Not in pixels, not in shadow, not in legacy. The next morning, as I stood in line at a cafe near my office, my phone buzzed with a notification from my cousin Melanie. She'd posted a photo of her gala invitation with the caption, "So proud of our girl, can't wait to celebrate this moment." My stomach dropped. I tapped the image and stared. It was the same invitation Isolde had sent me. Identical layout, same calligraphy. But one detail was missing. Marcellus's name. Where my version had said, Adelpha Caldwell and Dr. Marcellus King, this one simply read, Adelpha Caldwell cordially invites you. There was no typo. No formatting issue. It was deliberate. I checked 3 more family members' posts. Same version, every time. All of them conveniently leaving out the man I planned to marry. I called Isolde's assistant first. Tina, polite, rehearsed, cautious. She pretended not to understand the difference at first, but when pressed, admitted there were 2 versions. One tailored for the general family list, and the other for more public figures. I hung up before she could finish. By the time I reached Isolde's office at the foundation, I'd mentally rehearsed every line of the conversation I wanted to have. But when I saw her standing by the window, scrolling her phone like she was bored with the entire skyline, most of it vanished. She looked up briefly. Adelpha, you didn't schedule anything. I didn't need to. You edited my engagement out of the gala invitation. She didn't flinch. I edited the guest of honor list for clarity. You're the honoree. It was important to keep the focus. Clean. I blinked. You think his name makes it dirty? She crossed her arms. Some names carry more weight. You know that. We didn't want distractions. Distractions, I repeated, tasting the word like it was acid. You don't understand the kind of scrutiny we face, she said. These donors, these legacy families, they come from very particular expectations. I'm protecting you. You're not protecting me. You're editing me. You're being theatrical. I stepped closer. No, I'm being direct. You're erasing the man I love because you're embarrassed to say his name out loud in front of your country club board. She paused, then spoke slower. There's a difference between loving someone privately and making them part of the public image of this family. I nodded. You're right. And here's the part you're not going to like. I don't want to be part of your public image anymore. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. I turned and walked out before she could reply. That evening, I was scheduled to stop by the gala venue for a logistics walkthrough. It was the final run-through before printed programs and table arrangements were finalized. Marcellus offered to come, but I told him I needed space. I didn't want him to see me unravel. The venue was quiet when I arrived, rows of round tables still being set, linens half-steamed, centerpieces waiting in boxes. The AV technician, a guy maybe in his mid-20s, wearing cargo pants and a headset, was taping down cords at the back of the stage. "Ms. Caldwell?" he asked, wiping his hand before offering it. "Yes?" "Just wanted to say, your fiancé is a solid guy." I frowned. "You've met Marcellus?" "Last night. He came by around 9, helped us sort out the projection glitch, stayed till nearly midnight, said he wanted to make sure everything worked right for you." I swallowed. He didn't mention it. Didn't act like he needed credit, just helped. That kind of guy. As I left the venue, I sat in my car for a long time, fingers wrapped around the steering wheel. All this effort to make him invisible. And he was still showing up behind the scenes, cleaning up their messes. When I got home, I opened my laptop and pulled up the list of confirmed guests and seating charts. My name was next to the keynote slot. Marcellus's wasn't mentioned once in the entire program draft. I clicked into the design software, highlighted the footer where donor families were listed, and typed his full name at the bottom, Dr. Marcellus King. I didn't save it, I just stared at it. 5 simple words. He didn't need recognition to exist, but they needed to bury him to maintain control. And that was the part I couldn't forgive. I closed the laptop and whispered to myself, they keep trying to erase his name. Maybe because deep down, they know it's more worthy than theirs. The apartment was quiet that afternoon. I had just returned from a meeting downtown and was reheating leftover soup, trying to convince myself that everything wasn't unraveling. The room smelled faintly of basil and something slightly burnt from the microwave. I set my phone on the counter and scrolled through emails absent-mindedly. That's when I saw the message. The notification preview alone was enough to steal the air from my lungs. It was from Seraphine. At first glance, it looked like any other family group message, short, chatty, unnecessary. But this one wasn't meant for a group. It was sent directly to me. Let her enjoy her little pet project. He'll be gone in a month anyway. Followed 2 seconds later by, "Oops, wrong person." No emojis, no recovery. Just that, raw, dismissive, careless. I didn't reply, didn't blink. I stood there staring at the screen while the microwave beeped behind me. Ignored. Marcellus had been in my life for over 2 years. He had been there when I lost my job during the nonprofit restructuring. He'd driven 3 hours to pick up my father from the emergency room when Seraphine was on a shoot, and Everett claimed to be in back-to-back meetings. But to them, he was still a passing hobby, a detour, a mistake I was expected to outgrow. I closed the message and dropped my phone face down on the counter. The next morning, Marcellus called just before noon. "Come walk with me," he said. No details, just a simple ask. We met at the south edge of Washington Park, just as the sun was breaking through the cloud cover. Spring hadn't fully arrived yet, but the trees were beginning to believe. Buds curled at the tips of branches, and the air smelled faintly of wet soil. We walked in silence for nearly 10 minutes. He didn't ask what was wrong, and I didn't offer. Finally, near a bench worn smooth by time, he stopped. He turned toward me, his hands tucked in the pockets of his jacket. "I know you're stuck," he said. My throat tightened. "I'm not." "You are," he cut in gently. "And I don't blame you. But I need to say something you might not want to hear." I nodded, unable to speak. "I don't need to be liked by your family," he said. "That was never part of the deal. I love you. That's the part that matters to me." I looked at him, trying to hold myself still. "But I can't keep watching you choose silence over yourself," he continued. "Every time they ignore me, they're ignoring you. Every time they push me aside, you let them. And that's starting to chip away at who you are." I felt the words settle into my chest like pebbles falling into a pond. Not loud, but they stirred everything. He didn't accuse, didn't make demands, just held up a mirror and left the room for me to decide what I wanted to see. We walked back toward the car. The air between us wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was honest. That night, after he dropped me off, I showered, changed into a sweatshirt, and sat at my desk. I opened a new email. To Seraphine. Subject, brunch. I typed only one sentence. "I won't be attending the pre-gala brunch. I no longer wish to be used as decoration." No explanation, no apologies, just the truth. I hit send. I didn't wait for a response. Then I picked up my phone, opened our family group chat, and muted it, all of it. I had been trained my whole life to stay calm, to smile through discomfort, to dress things up so no one felt challenged. But that email was my first act of disobedience, small as it was, my first refusal to play the role I had been given. It wasn't an explosion, it was a clean cut. Later that evening, I sat on the couch and stared at my phone, not waiting for Seraphine's reply, but bracing for the shift I knew was coming. These people didn't respect boundaries. They recoiled from them like light to shadows, but I had drawn a line. And once drawn, I wouldn't pull it back. If they wanted polite, I whispered to the empty room, they shouldn't have taught me precision. He didn't steal your spotlight. He exposed your darkness. I hadn't planned on speaking. That night, I only meant to survive it, to smile for a few photos, keep my posture clean, and leave early with my dignity intact. But something shifted inside me the second Marcellus reached for that microphone, and by the time he stepped off the stage, I knew there was no more room for polite retreat. The grand pavilion pulsed with an uneasy silence, the kind that swallows even the clink of a champagne flute. I rose from my seat slowly, deliberately, as if the silence itself was waiting to see if I'd sit back down. I didn't. I walked, heels clicking on marble, eyes tracking me like I was the problem they hadn't planned for. The moment I reached the edge of the stage, I caught Seraphine's face, tight, frozen, carefully pleasant. And Isolde, seated at her table with her jaw clenched so hard I wondered if her teeth would crack. But Vernon, my father, didn't move. He just watched me. Quiet, unreadable. Marcellus met my gaze as I passed him, stepping off the platform. I squeezed his hand briefly. That was all we needed. The MC hesitated when he saw me. Ms. Caldwell, the program is— It can wait, I said, taking the microphone from his hand. My voice didn't shake. Not anymore. I turned to face the ballroom. I wasn't on tonight's agenda, I began. That seems to be a pattern lately. A few murmurs, a cough, but mostly silence. I've been part of this family my whole life, and yet somehow my presence is still considered an adjustment, my choices, a deviation, my love, a liability. My eyes scanned the tables, landing on Seraphine, who now stared down at her wine glass like it held answers. I heard what was said earlier. And I want to say something back, not for the sake of decorum, but for the sake of truth. I let that sit a moment, no rush, let them stew. When you reduce someone's life to a punchline, you reveal more about your own fears than their worth. You don't just belittle them, you cheapen yourself. I paused again. The room had settled into an unnatural stillness, a sort of collective holding of breath. A few months ago, Marcellus, my fiancé, treated a man who collapsed outside a courthouse downtown. He kept that man breathing until paramedics arrived, saved his life. That man was Vernon Caldwell, my father. Gasps rippled across the room. Heads turned toward my father, who nodded once, slowly. He never asked for recognition, never even told me. I found out weeks later from a nurse, because that's the kind of man he is. He shows up when it matters, even when the people he saves would rather he disappear the moment they're back on their feet. A few people looked away. A few looked ashamed. I have been quiet for too long. I have tried to protect everyone's feelings except my own. But I'm done being the footnote in a family that only values headlines. My hand tightened around the microphone. Marcellus didn't come here tonight to be judged. He came to support the woman he loves, even when that love was inconvenient for those who claim to care about me. He didn't speak to make a scene. He spoke to stop the bleeding. I let my voice soften, not to retreat, but to sharpen its edge. If any of you think your wealth or lineage makes you immune to accountability, tonight should be your reminder. It doesn't. And if you think you can erase someone's presence by cropping their name out of invitations or their face out of photos, let me assure you, presence is not permission. It is earned, and he has earned it tenfold. I stepped back from the microphone. No applause, no music, just a quiet that vibrated with reckoning. Marcellus took my hand as I descended the steps. Seraphine still hadn't moved. Isolde's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. As we returned to our table, the MC fumbled back onto the stage, trying to regain order, but the room had already changed. Later that night, after the speeches limped to an awkward close and the guests began to trickle out, a woman in her 60s with silver hair approached us. "I've known your family for decades," she said quietly. "I've never seen anyone stand that tall on a stage that wasn't built for them." I thanked her. I didn't need her approval, but her honesty meant something. As we left the grand pavilion, the air outside was crisp, almost bracing. Marcellus slipped his jacket over my shoulders without saying a word. We didn't speak much on the ride home, but I knew we'd just crossed a line, together, and this time, I wasn't going back. The applause never came. Marcellus stepped down from the stage, returning to his seat like a man who'd simply said what needed saying. Nothing more, nothing less. Around him, the room remained frozen. No clinks of forks, no whispered commentary. Just stunned silence. It was the kind of stillness that follows an earthquake. Not peaceful, but stunned. Waiting for the next tremor. I sat beside him, spine straight, chin high. Inside, my chest was thunder. Not from fear, but from something older and deeper. Validation. For once, the spotlight hadn't burned him. It had burned the mask off the people around us. From across the ballroom, I noticed movement at the main table. Vernon, my father, slowly pushed back his chair. Unlike the others, he didn't glance around for reaction. He didn't speak. He just stood. And then, in a room full of guests who now hung on every micro-expression, he walked. Deliberate. Steady. Without excuse. He moved toward the side table where the Gala programs and guest books were laid out, picked up a single white envelope, placed it beside the silver-framed donation placard, and exited the room without a word. All eyes followed him. Isolde sat motionless. No shift in her shoulders. No twitch of disapproval. Her composure was porcelain, untouched, unfeeling. Seraphine looked less composed. Her face had gone pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if the room had tilted. She looked to Everett, who whispered something through clenched teeth. She didn't respond. Curiosity rippled like static. People began to whisper in low tones. Phones emerged, discreet at first, then less so. One man near the stage tapped his screen twice, angling his phone toward his wife. I caught snippets of what he said. "That was the fiancé, right? Did you hear what he said about her dad? He saved Vernon Caldwell's life and they ignored him?" I felt my heartbeat slow into something calmer, colder. The truth had broken the seal. Now it was leaking through every corner of the ballroom. Someone nudged my elbow gently. I turned. It was Maya Latham, one of the trustees from the Foundation's education board. She leaned in, not for gossip, but with intent. "Young lady," she whispered, "don't you dare shrink after this." I didn't respond, but her words settled into my spine like steel rods. I excused myself from the table and crossed the floor. Slowly, silently. The way one moves through a chapel after the sermon has gone too deep. At the donation table, the envelope Vernon had left sat untouched. I picked it up. It was unsealed, folded neatly, my name handwritten on the outside. Inside, a single sheet of thick stationery with my father's slanted script. "I stayed quiet to protect you from them, but I realize now, I was only protecting myself. No signature, no plea for forgiveness, just an admission, a truth, as simple and heavy as gravity." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe, not out of sadness, but from the weight of finally being seen by the one man I thought would never choose sides. When I turned back, the ballroom had transformed. It no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a courtroom after the verdict, and the jury was restless. Phones now openly glowed in palms and purses. The soft hum of notifications pinged from corners. Someone had already uploaded the video of Marcellus's speech to social media. The caption was simple. "He said what they wouldn't." I opened the clip myself. It had only been up for 10 minutes. Already over 6,000 views. Comments piling in. Some were stunned, others were angry. But the one that stopped me was this. If that's what love looks like, I hope we all get humiliated. I exhaled, blinking back something close to awe. They started this gala for legacy. I think they just inherited the truth. They laughed at him, and in the end, he's the only one who told the truth. That thought clung to me as I watched guests leave in small waves, some left with heads down, others with practiced poise, as if their heels could somehow outrun the echo of what had just unfolded. But most avoided our eyes. Marcellus stood beside me, his presence calm but unshakable. A few attendees came up to him quietly, an older couple from the education board, a younger man from one of the youth programs, each one thanking him, not with theatrics, with sincerity. One woman gripped his hand for a full 10 seconds before whispering, "You reminded me what decency looks like." Isolde didn't approach us, but I could see her several feet away, speaking with a foundation board member who wore panic like cologne. He leaned into her ear, trying to keep his voice low, but I caught fragments. Videos already up. Nearly 300,000 views. Pull the press, now. Too late. The moment had already grown wings. I knew because my own phone vibrated in my clutch. 3 texts from former colleagues, a voicemail from an editor I hadn't spoken to in over a year, and a screenshot from my cousin Melanie. Marcellus on stage, his words captioned in bold font. He didn't ask for gratitude, but he wouldn't allow mockery dressed as elegance. And beneath it, millions of eyes, watching, witnessing. I excused myself gently and walked toward the back corridor. I needed air, but I got Isolde instead. She intercepted me near the entrance to the gallery wing, her heels silent on the carpet, her presence rehearsed. "Adelpha," she said, tone neutral. "May I speak with you privately?" I didn't nod, but I didn't walk away either. She gestured toward a curtained lounge. We stepped inside. The lights were low. A tray of half-finished drinks sat abandoned on the side table. Isolde spoke first. "The board is divided. Some are deeply embarrassed. Others think this will blow over." I waited. She inhaled through her nose, then offered what she thought was a lifeline. "If you issue a brief statement, say the video was taken out of context or edited unfairly, we can still salvage this. We'll tell them Marcellus never intended to speak, that it was emotional improvisation." I raised an eyebrow. "You want me to lie?" "I want you to protect your future," she said plainly. "This foundation could be yours. You've earned it. Don't let this one night define everything." I crossed my arms. It didn't define everything. It revealed it. Isolde's face froze, her smile cracking beneath the surface. I took a step closer, lowered my voice. "I don't want a legacy that requires me to shrink. Not for cameras. Not for donors, and definitely not for a family name that only loves me in silence." Her next words came too quickly. "You're overreacting." "No, I'm finally reacting." I turned and walked back into the ballroom where the cleanup had begun. Linens folded, glasses clinked, a few guests still lingering near the bar. The mic still sat on its stand near the stage, untouched since Marcellus laid it down. I walked toward it. There was no announcement, no fanfare, just movement. Someone tried to stop me. I think it was the event coordinator. But I nodded once, firmly. "I won't take long." When I stepped up to the mic again, the room shifted. Conversations quieted. Some turned around, others paused mid-step. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't scan for approval. I simply said, "I love my family, I do. But love that has to be proven by silence is not love, it's survival. And I'm done surviving at the cost of my own voice." I let that sit. My fiancé spoke earlier, not because he wanted attention, but because you pushed him against the wall of your own discomfort. He defended his own dignity because no one else in this room had the courage to do it for him. Eyes flicked across the space, toward Seraphine, toward Isolde, toward the door Vernon had walked out of. I am not ashamed of him. I am ashamed of every one of you who clapped when he was quiet and recoiled the second he spoke. No applause, just truth. I will not inherit a legacy built on selective inclusion. I will not continue the tradition of trimming the truth to fit a photo frame. And I will not apologize for choosing a man whose decency outshines every table setting in this room. I stepped away from the mic. Someone began clapping. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. Another joined in, then another. It wasn't a standing ovation. It didn't need to be. Marcellus was waiting at the edge of the room, jacket folded neatly over his arm. Eyes steady. As we exited, a few people nodded to us. Some avoided our eyes. Others looked like they wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Outside, the city air felt different, crisp, honest. He opened the car door for me, pausing just long enough for me to glance back. The venue glowed behind us, a monument to everything that had once intimidated me. Not anymore. They laughed at him, I said softly. And in the end, he's the only one who told the truth. We drove home in silence that night. The kind that didn't ache anymore, just settled. Marcellus kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting between us, palm up. I slid mine into it without thinking. It was instinct now, like breath, like truth. Morning broke gray and quiet, the kind of stillness Chicago sometimes gifted after a stormy night, cold but strangely clean. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, wrapped in one of Marcellus's hoodies, clutching a mug of black coffee. My phone sat face up on the counter, vibrating every few minutes. The first text was from a college roommate I hadn't seen in 5 years. "Girl, you just broke the internet." Then a producer from a podcast I once guested on. "Would love to have you and Marcellus on to talk redefining legacy." And a journalist I didn't recognize. Confirming facts. Was it true your fiancé saved Vernon Caldwell? I ignored them all for now. I just watched the local morning show on mute. The segment title scrolled across the bottom of the screen. When silence speaks louder than applause, doctor's speech goes viral. They showed a short clip of Marcellus on stage, his voice low, eyes steady, the audience behind him motionless. Then a still photo of Vernon walking out of the ballroom. The caption read, "Father breaks ranks during Gala fallout." I didn't smile. Not out of bitterness, just out of something more grounded than that. Clarity. This wasn't a victory lap. This was the start of an entirely different race. My voicemail icon lit up. I hesitated, then played the latest one. It was Vernon. "Adelpha." His voice was gravel, slower than usual. "I should have said this earlier. I should have said a lot of things earlier. But I'm proud of you. Proud of the way you carry yourself. I didn't know how to be loud for you. I hope it's not too late." I sat at the table and let that message sit with me. It didn't erase everything, but it wasn't nothing. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. Mailless, just a single text. "You did what I couldn't." I closed my eyes for a beat. That line carried its own weight. A generation's worth, maybe. Isolde. Nothing. No call. No text. Just the same well-tailored silence she'd always used as punishment. And now it felt more like irrelevance. By mid-morning, I was dressed and ready to meet a former colleague for coffee at a spot near Lincoln Park. Marcellus offered to drive, but I needed to walk. The kind of walk that shook off months of rehearsed grace. As I left the building, my phone rang again, an unknown number. I almost declined it, but something told me to pick up. "Ms. Caldwell, this is Dana Ward from the National Institute for Civic Leadership. We saw the clip from last night. Our board was deeply moved. We're organizing a summit on ethical courage next month. Would you be willing to speak?" I paused. "What do you want me to talk about?" "Truth? Integrity. The cost of keeping quiet." I smiled, just a little. "That I can do." After the call, I kept walking. Through the streets I grew up on. Past buildings my family had donated wings to. past banners with names that never included mine. And yet here I was, more seen than I had ever been under their chandeliers. I met Marcellus outside the cafe. He was waiting with 2 cups of coffee and that same quiet smile he wore the first night we met. We strolled through the park, the early spring sun warming the sidewalk in broken patches. "I don't want to be remembered for walking out," I said as we passed a group of kids playing tag near the fountains. "I want to be remembered for standing up." He squeezed my hand. "You already are." A block ahead, we passed a newsstand. The headline on a folded copy of the Tribune caught my eye. "When silence is a weapon, and when it's power." Beneath the headline was a photo, not of me, of him, standing alone on the stage, mid-sentence, face steady. The room behind him blurred. I stood there a moment, absorbing it all. The sidewalk, the coffee, the quiet hum of Sunday traffic. "They erased me from their photo," I murmured, "but not from the truth." Some legacies aren't built, they're inherited. And when they're built on silence, exclusion, or shame, maybe it's time someone breaks the pattern. What would you do if the people who raised you refused to acknowledge the person you chose to love? Would you stay silent or take the mic? Let me know in the comments below. And if stories like this make you think, reflect, or feel seen, don't forget to subscribe. More true stories, more truth, every week.